So today we are talking about the changing social mores in Canadian society. So essentially, how our thoughts as a society have changed, our thoughts on certain aspects of society have changed, and the impact that that will have on society and especially society's wellness. So, just a couple definitions to start. First one, social cohesion. So that's the togetherness of society. And we talked about this at length already at the beginning of the course. Essentially, how socially connected is everyone? How adhesive is the culture that we live in? So it's the social connections of a given society. Now, social cohesion is maintained by an elaborate set of behaviors, and you got to think certain social cues, the idea of walking on the one side of the hallway as opposed to another, and what happens when that social norm or that social cue is violated. It, it's not disastrous, but it is inconvenient. And the amount of trust that we put in other individuals too, especially when we're driving, if you're pulling close to the median, how much trust is actually involved with people that you don't know? These would be, that's a pretty elaborate system, pretty intricate of how much trust we put in total strangers to survive. Folkways are customs and conventional behaviors. Customs and conventional behaviors. So if you violate a folkway, you are considered eccentric, but are still accepted by society. So it'd be something like someone who orders a dessert before they eat a main meal, or someone who wears shorts on the coldest day of the year. They might be a little eccentric, maybe a little different, but it really doesn't hurt anyone. I guess maybe it could hurt with the person with the shorts, it could hurt them, I guess, but it's not that big of a deal. Okay? Whereas opposed to a social more is if you violate a social more, you are not only seen as eccentric, but you're actually seen as harmful to society or harmful to yourself. So social mores are behaviors regarded as essential to the welfare and the survival of a group. Behaviors regarded as essential to the welfare and survival of the group. If you violate social mores, you're considered to be not eccentric but harmful. So, something like responding to a disagreement with violence. There's a debate in class, and all of a sudden the person gets violent. That would be violating a social more, and which is ironic because we're going to talk about how our tolerance towards violence has increased. Maybe our thinking about smoking has shifted, and I wonder if you smoke now, are you seen as eccentric or are you seen as harmful? I think that's really interesting. Oh, maybe our attitudes towards sober driving. That maybe decades ago it was seen as somewhat acceptable to have a couple of drinks and get behind the wheel, where now we're seeing that that is a violation. That's a social more that's violated. That if you have more than one drink an hour, that you are seen as harmful. And I think society has done a good job to entrench that into our mainstream thinking. Now, social mores do change over time due to new experiences, changing expectations, and shifts in political climate. And so even if we took the role that women have in society from 120 years ago, there was a major cultural, societal, political, and economic shift to where the role that women have today in Canada. And I think that's good. Now, there will be some shifts that are going to have some negative effects, and we'll talk about those effects shortly. So right now, there are four areas that the traditional textbook from this course talks about in that the thinking of society has changed. The first one is tolerance for violence. Essentially, that social mores or sorry, our social more is that um, we're being desensitized to violence, and it's just kind of accepted. So social commentators worry that there's a growing tolerance for violence, which provides poor role models for youth. When I started my career 12 years ago, anytime we'd show a war scene or a scene from the Holocaust or something of that nature, we were expected to send a letter home and get it signed that the parents would have to give permission to watch such a clip. Now that doesn't happen. And something that was shocking 12, 15 years ago does not have the same sort of shock value um, that it does in this current generation. This current generation, you could say, has grown up with violent video games, with games like Grand Theft Auto and Mortal Kombat, and even I think it's Metal Gear that's being released, which has a scene of the player, is extracting a bomb from a young girl's stomach. Like that's pretty intense, and yeah. Even our news coverage has become desensitized, or our Hollywood entertainment has become sensitized. And I think of some of the classic horror movies like Psycho back in the day wouldn't actually show the murder scene, and it would be kind of left to our imagination. But now these scenes are shown. Laval University did some studies about exposure to violence, and they say by the time children are 12, they have seen 12,000 violent deaths on TV. So violent deaths of, and it can be even cartoon characters, and you can see classic cartoons like Elmer Fudd shooting at a bunch of different people, maybe even video games, and I started thinking about this. I was playing a video game with my 4-year-old cousin years ago, and we were playing Super Mario Brothers, and we were jumping on the little critters. I forget the real name of those. And when you jump on the heads of the critters, they disappear. And my little cousin had asked, well, did we kill them? What happened to the little critters? And she was all concerned for that. So I kind of had to think about saying that we just made them disappear. I don't know if that study would consider such an act of like Super Mario Brothers or Sonic as as a violent death or not. And Laval University suggests that children's TV shows are 68% more violent, or have 68% more violent scenes than adult shows. And this is largely due to violence can transcend culture. You can show a violent or a fight or a boxing match or a war scene, and that can be interpreted the same cross cultures. Humor is not the same. Humor is difficult to go beyond the culture that it's from, and trying to teach, and I don't like giving this example, but watching Borat and trying to teach that character what sarcasm is and what humor is, it doesn't transcend well across other cultures, but violence does. Now, defenders say violence on children's programming is fake, and that children have the ability to decipher the difference between a fake death or a character's death and real death. I don't know if a kid watching WWE wrestling knows that that's fake. I'm not sure. Psychologists suggest that violence is a learned behavior, and that children internalize these violent messages. So some say we have become desensitized to the amount of violence on TV. Okay, so as we're becoming more desensitized to violence, what is that doing to our overall health? Are we becoming a more violent society? No, I don't think so. I think violent crime continues to go down across the country. However, the reporting of violent crime has gone up exponentially. So we hear news stories about these violent crimes that we wouldn't have heard of years ago, but it's just being reported more often. Okay, so attitudes towards recreational drugs. There seems to be a growing trend, I should say trend, that suggests there's a growing tolerance for reformed drug laws. And even today, we're seeing that with places like Washington and Colorado decriminalizing marijuana usage. Even Justin Trudeau, the leader of the Liberal Party here in Canada, is suggesting that we need to reform marijuana laws. But years ago, so this could be a symbol of the shift in Canadian society. And because years ago, marijuana use would be, affiliated with the whole idea of reefer madness and negative things like that. And I still think there's negative connotations and negative aspects of drug use. But are we becoming a little more liberal and tolerant of this? I'm not sure. I'm just leaving that rhetorical. So a few academics wrote a book called Illegal Leisure, and they conclude that the current drug policies in North America are based on three misconceptions. They say that drug use can lead to criminal behavior, that drug use leads to addiction, and that adolescents are pressured to use drugs now. So I'm always interested in the idea of addiction versus dependency, and a lot of defenders of or the pro-cannabis movement, I guess, suggest that marijuana is not addictive, but people can become dependent on it. And I'd really like to research the difference between dependency and addictions, because that worries me. So some police units are frustrated with the current policies, suggesting that putting someone in jail who's a drug user, does that do anything for their addictions? Or is it just kind of counterproductive? And I think there's some statistics that show the number of drug-related crimes who are behind bars, and why is the U.S. prison population so high? And it could be because of drug users and such, and maybe that's not the way to handle it, and maybe it's through rehab and such. Now, I'm kind of talking about more hardcore drugs than recreational drugs. I think that the social more here that is shifting is a growing acceptance for, I guess, quote unquote, softer drugs, even though I think that's a slippery slope. And then some people bring up the argument of gateway drugs and such. But maybe this attitude is becoming a little more liberalized. And so sociologists see society as an ever-changing organism from which attitudes to drug use are only one aspect. The third one is work-related stress. So we are becoming, the shift is that we're working more. We're becoming workaholics, and we're getting more work-related stress. Generations ago, because of technology use and such, we thought that this generation would be working less than their parents, when it's actually the opposite. Being connected to your work is causing more stress. So you're getting your work email sent directly to your phone, so you're really never disconnected from your workplace. And how healthy is that? And so right-wing thinkers think that the government should be less involved with the economy, and that the economy should be privatized, that we should have limited barriers to making a profit, and that the government shouldn't come in and put restrictions on certain things. And I would think a lot of people would say we do have a lot of restrictions. Defenders of that would say, well, these restrictions are there to keep people healthy and safe. And yeah, that's another debate. So in these times of globalization and some of our manufacturing moving overseas, a lot of jobs have been cut, and so departments have have had to merge, and perks of the job and benefits have been cut back. Um, Social mores have suggested that people are to work longer and harder than 20 years ago. So we're taking less vacation, we're working harder at our jobs, and maybe it's more brain stress than physical stress, and maybe we're not exercising enough, and I would think those would be all accurate. So this leads to work-related stress, and just ignore this comment. There's a table in our old school textbook that talks about the number of work-related stress incidents that BC has tracked. Um, and the UN suggests that mental health and anxiety and depression will be the leading cause of people missing work in the next generation. So it's something we need to talk about, and initiatives like Bell Let's Talk Day and stuff like that are hoping to reduce the stigma and to get people more aware of work-related stress and how to combat stress, anxiety, and mental illness. So academics suggest that stress is caused by persistent mental pressure and a lack of personal control. And they say that workers today have little time to spend with families. And you got to think, if you're commuting and stuck in traffic, that's going to add to the time away from your family, and that's good. That's bad, I think. And I think we live in a commuter culture. I don't. I live like a 3-minute drive away from my workplace, so that's something that doesn't affect me. But I definitely think having work emails come to my phone is a little bit problematic, and I don't know how healthy that is for me. Now, the D2L emails that you send, they don't come to me. Sometimes I wish they could, but I think it's for the best that I have some separation between work and home life. So unless people have successful coping strategies to deal with stress, eating right, sleeping properly, maybe some talk therapy, exercise, they may develop burnout. And burnout is defined as a syndrome of mental exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personalized accomplishments. Now, the treatment for work-related stress is often short-term. Take some time off, take a few days off. Well, that's often seen as a band-aid solution. We're just covering up the problem. The problem will still exist when that worker returns, whether it's just the intense pressure of the workplace, whether it's a coworker that they're not getting along with. So sometimes taking time off is not always the best solution, and the solutions are in fact short-term. So overall, people are getting sick more often, they're spending less time with family, and this is a cause for concern for our healthcare system. Now, maybe a positive shift is this idea of embracing the Aboriginal health initiatives. And this is very congruent to the health promotion model, whereby we are promoting health and trying to heal the whole body and keep the whole body healthy, rather than just attacking a virus or an illness at that spot, which we used to call, or what we would call, the health intervention model. So Western views humans or the human body as a machine, and illnesses are a breakdown, and they try to fix that illness to fix that part of the machine. So you just fix one part of the body. So let's say I have an esophagus infection. The health intervention model, or the non-Aboriginal model, would try to just to fix that infection, whereas the health promotion model would try to heal, have preventative health, and get me healthy so these things don't happen. But if I do get sick, the Aboriginal model would try to heal the whole body, not just the esophagus, but what's going on in the rest of the body that may have helped this infection grow. So you have to heal physically, emotionally, socially, and spiritually. And so they heal the entire body. So yes, it's a very left-wing, maybe a flowery approach, some would say, but this seems to be growing. And I think that's good for our healthcare system to not only deal with an illness, but talk about why you got sick and what you can do to improve your body and your health. So those are the 4 shifts that we are seeing and how it's impacting our health.